All right, guys, we are here with another one, the BladeMasterRUSH Show podcast. Gonna do the introductory remarks, get them out of the way. I'm BladeMasterRUSH. We have Tarpit today. I'm gonna introduce him in a second. So, if you enjoy the video, the audio, drop a sub, drop a like, all that fun stuff. This is gonna be on all socials. If you're listening from like Spotify, this is on YouTube at the BladeMasterRUSH Show. We got visuals, we got pretty faces. And so this is like a regular podcast series where I interview like people I've met and talk about fun things, cool things, interesting things. And Tarpit is someone that I met a little while back through Twitch, and I'm gonna let him do a full introduction, but he's a musician, part-time coyote hunter, game developer. He's this really dope game called Animyst, which is started in Rust, but I'll let you I'll let you talk about yourself proper.
Okay. What up, y'all? I'm Tarpit. Streamer, musician, game dev. Tarpit on Twitch, Animyst on Steam, spelled with a Y like the old game Mist. If you want to hear my music, search Tarpit No Life. That's my new album right now on YouTube.
Link will be in bio. It's dope. Check it out.
Yeah, and that's wherever you get music, you can find that album.
Word. So today we have I am a big fan of the topics. We have a couple topics. I'm gonna read them as they were sent to me. The bifurcation of U.S. societies into utterly separate political social camps and the growing gap between them, UFOs, aliens, which do exist, and world building as a mammoth swing in narrative forms, starting with Lord of the Rings and going up to now, games, Marvel Cinematic Universe, and other franchise storytellers. So we're going to talk about politics first, I guess the greater, the divide.
It's almost like calling it politics is almost a part of the problem right now.
Right? Yeah. That's why. Like as I said it, I was like, yeah. I don't know if I'm gonna call it politics, but
people do so many comments I see on YouTube, different places where it'll be like, oh, and suddenly we're talking about politics when it's like, well, for example, when you're talking about like climate change, kids in cages. Politics isn't really kind of the right word for like crushing human crises.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know, I guess it's kind of terrible that people like reduce or something like that, like things that should not be on a political spectrum, like just oppression into like, oh, that's a democratic thing or whatever, and it's like, oh man, like that is not a good social, that is not a good state. But do you want to like maybe run through, like do like a couple minute like what is this topic, and then we'll just delve into it?
Yeah, sure.
If that's even possible.
So basically, I'm just getting really nervous about not just the opinion gap, but about the fact that basically there are civilizations setting up and that have set up on both sides. So what a lot of people, because I'm generally in like a liberal press bubble and a liberal social bubble, but I do my best to pop that bubble a lot more than my family members, a lot of my friends. And so I feel like even just getting in debates on YouTube, Reddit, Twitch, in games, I feel like I have some proximity to that other side, which is really the red side of America right now. And what I think a lot of folks don't realize is just that there's an industry creating truth for the left, giving it to the left, and there's an industry creating a different truth that gives it to the right. Folks are constantly like, oh, whatever this issue is, be it something terrifying that Trump said or did, they say, oh, this is the thing that's going to be bad to him, but they don't realize that basically other folks go to Breitbart, they go to Fox News, they go to Facebook, and that story isn't even there. They're reading stories about other stuff. And so basically, to me, I just feel like schisms this big lead to war. And I don't think that it's going to look like any other war we can imagine. Like, there are folks who are fantasizing about an American Civil War that would be like World War II in the States. And that's just not what it would be. Like, for example, I might posit that all of, Trump's entire presidency is an attack in a war by Russia. You could, so I think that the nature of war changes, but basically this gap we're seeing, I just don't see it healing. I can't imagine it healing, and I feel like gaps like that, when they open, what happens is violence.
Yeah. But I've been like
no predictions about what it'll look like.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell. I've been following. I'm in the liberal camp. I've been following social issues for a while. I think before it really started picking up, I remember like maybe 2014. I started, just getting into like what's going on in politics, whatever. And it's definitely gotten to a point pretty quickly where, like, I mean, for whatever, okay, on the deep internet, there's always been this schism where, like, like when it's anonymous, like one side's like, oh, fuck you, it's like this, and the other side's like, fuck you, it's like this. But now it's like just normal. Like, you can't even like talk to people on the other side, or it's I think you could talk to them, but it's basically like two people come to talk about completely, the opposite camps, and both are their viewpoint is never going to change from that conversation. Like, even if like, so there's no point in even, like, sometimes it feels like there's no point in talk. Like, you don't want to, like, go into a conversation like, oh, I'm going to convince this person to take on my view, but you can't even like dialogue just cease to be even possible in a way where, like, two people can kind of, like, maturely talk about, whatever.
Yep. Yeah. That's exactly where we're at. If you have a misunderstanding of evolution, and I maybe have a better understanding of evolution, you can say yours, I'll say mine, and then I can use science to change your mind, in theory. Or at least we can have a debate where we both say, well, let's lean on what the scientific literature says, or the evidence that we can observe says, and the scientific method. And, this is why with logic I can say to you why your opinion could get better, and it could. When we disagree and I say, oh no, but here is, here's like a pure mathematical reason, for example, that what you're saying couldn't be right. And you say, who wrote that math textbook? Oh, you believe NASA's graphs? Like, you sweet summer child, you believe what the U.S. Geological Survey is telling you. And that's where it's impossible to have the dialogue like you're saying, because there's no shared rubric. Now, what I feel like something that has happened is that the right has learned how to use weapons that are traditionally used by the left. And skepticism of power is a traditionally left-leaning kind of rhetorical device and thought pattern. Typically to say, oh, what the government is telling you is a lie is a much more traditionally left-leaning thought than the right. When the right learned how to weaponize that narrative and how to deploy that skepticism of official forms of truth, it's gotten us to exactly where we are. I feel like another example of that is crying victimhood from political and social repression or oppression used to be a thing that the left had access to and used as a political weapon. Now the right has that. There are white, well-off people in America saying, we're being oppressed. And those types of narratives,
like, it's beyond belief. Like, you can't convince them they're not being oppressed.
So it's OP, in my opinion, because it's the cherished weapons of the left. It's the cherished weapons of those being oppressed that are now being wielded by the oppressor. That's like Kant's master-slave dialectic, except the master now has both forms of power. He took the type of power that the slave had, and it's OP.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know. I guess, I mean, I'm 25, 26, so I don't really know properly say in the early 2000s, but it does feel like there's been this transition in technology and media has fueled it in a way where like you in the past may not have had as much access to resources that will just let you sit in your camp and be like, no, fuck you, this guy's saying this, like I'm not listening to you. And in the past, so you can really get, and I think as maybe commonly known, you can really get in your own like tunnel of this view, and then it's just, yeah.
Totally. And when social media was first taking off, maybe 2009, I had the rosest glasses on about it. And looking back, I can see how I was right, but I also just missed so much, because I think that social media, the internet, it is democracy. It is represents to a degree a diffusion of information sharing power and a diffusion of truth creation power, to the point where now folks are a lot more able to create their own opinions, broadcast them, share them. And looking back from a time where there was only the mass media and nothing else, that seems like a very democratic goal. However, there is nothing good about democracy without strong public education. That's kind of what I've been thinking about lately. It's like Trump and everything else we're seeing, where even flat Earth can become a political camp that holds some weight, and QAnon and things that would have never been allowed into the like New York Times, CNN, NBC, C-SPAN situation in 2000. Now that those things are allowed to reproduce and grow kind of in the information landscape, like that's what happens. Like you basically, democracy is not ideal without wicked robust public education.
Yeah, and I'm gonna say something, and if you're on the right, like you might take offense to this, but it's like I have this one friend. He's incredibly wealthy. He has every like. There is no reason he he could totally be just super conservative. Like there's like all of his like character traits. Like he like a lot of his peers are just conservative, whatever. Like he doesn't have any obligation to be liberal. But what he likes to like a point he likes to make often, and when he talks about it, I think he is better about citing this and that. I can't, so take it for what you will. But there's a direct correlation between education and like liberalism. So like in places where education is, people aren't really getting taught about how to interact with ideas, and like they're not getting taught to be liberal. They're just being taught how to think. Yep. Yeah, so that's telling to me. And like that's one of those things where it's like there is studies. Like I'm not saying like I'm right because I'm liberal and you're wrong because you're conservative. Like this is like there's studies done on this. Maybe I'll find them and link them. So there's a liberal lean when there's an increase in education.
I forget who said it. It might have been Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert. It's like running through my head, but it's like truth has a well-known liberal bias. Yeah. But it's confusing to know how to feel, because that schism, it doesn't get healed, and it doesn't get shrank by us just congratulating ourselves about this greater perspective we have and how right we are. They feel right too, and that's what makes me nervous. Because it's like an example is like Joe Rogan getting potentially censored or reined in somewhat by Spotify. It's hard to know how to feel, because to build bridges over that gap, you need to tolerate Ben Shapiro's vile, evil, cynical, nihilist ass. And part of me feels like it's unconscionable to let Ben Shapiro speak on a platform. And the other part of me feels like it's one of the biggest weaknesses of the left, that we don't like getting our hands dirty, and we don't want to embrace solutions that are imperfect. You can have people arguing that windmills kill birds, and everyone's waiting for that silver bullet in climate change, or everyone's looking at Joe Biden's record on crime or his corporate record and all this stuff, and we're really unwilling to like choose between the lesser of two evils. And one thing I noticed, especially kind of in our age group, I'm 31, but I consider us pretty close together, is that a lot of people say the Democrats and the Republicans, they're both evil. So I don't vote, and I ignore all of it because I know that all of it's bullshit. And my thing is that, but when you're driving a ship as big as the United States, two different versions of evil bullshit, the differences between those are enormous. And we need to be willing to choose between two loathsome choices, because abstaining, even though it feels very smart, it's not to me. You know what I mean? I'm losing your audio.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. I was just saying, I just changed our region real quick. Everything look good still?
Yep.
Yeah, I changed it to West because you were lagging out a little bit. But yeah,
Gotcha.
what I was gonna say that, yeah, I think the tricky, in reaction to what you said, there's like this, so from like a supposedly non-biased stance, you'd think, yeah, let Ben Shapiro get up there. He says some crazy shit. People are gonna be like, fuck this guy, man. Like, this guy is clearly ridiculous. But then we have this like, that's not actually what happens. What happens is he gets up there. The people who already dislike his views are like, fuck this guy. And then there are people that are like, yeah, okay, I'm here with you. And so then, like, but yeah, I mean, you can't, so you censor the guy, like, it's just, the schism is hard to break.
Totally. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think there's a reason that happens. I think that truth or truer ideas, or another way to say that would be ideas that describe reality well, tend to be nuanced. They tend to take more than half a sentence to express. And they tend to refer to some, reality is full of paradoxes and shades of gray. It's very difficult to sum anything up quickly. But so that might be why, it's, shallow, reactionary, aggressive ideas do tend to do well. I mean, you think about the YouTube algorithm. It's gonna reward stuff that's extreme, that's in your face, that's loud, because that's what gets clicks. And so, like, for me, you mentioned the coyote hunting thing. I've been researching camouflage a ton to aid with that. And YouTube is trying to red pill me so hard. And it's so easy to say these kind of red pill slogans about prepping, about social unrest, about the BLM protests, and it's just technically longer and more difficult to do a better job and discuss these things with nuance. So that's one reason that I think, like, for example, YouTube allows those ideologies to just spread like such wildfire.
Yeah, that's pretty much the emerging dynamic, is the the sites want the views, they want the money, and they don't really care if it's right. So yeah. Some people, sometimes they try to censor things, but then people are like, oh, you're censoring this and not the other thing, and it's already too late, kind of. Like, the Alex Jones is already like 4,000 episodes deep, or whatever, like, he's already got his audience.
Totally.
So they cancel Alex Jones, and like, it works, but it's almost like too late. But what are you gonna do?
Yeah. That's kind of why when I come across like a liberal meme or like a pithy slogan that also makes sense to me, I just cherish that shit and I deploy it. Like one I learned was in a comment battle on a YouTube video where people started talking about Black Lives Matter, the protests, and the ridiculous all lives matter talking point. And somebody said, when you say all lives matter, that's like my house is burning down, and you're saying, but what about my house? In like a nice like 12 to 14 word concept like that hits really hard. To me, it's like the left doesn't do a good enough job of generating those things. And so when I find those, I just like put them in my pocket and I'm trying to like build a library of like pithy slogans that I can use when I'm talking to folks. On Twitch too, especially because we get into this stuff on my stream a lot, and you'd be surprised, even on my weird stream, how much you might have an anti-masker there, or someone that thinks that the protesters should have been shot and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I like kind of already mentioned, but I think it's like a very like the All Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter is a very exemplary or interesting example, or exemplary example. So my father, who's like 50, so this is 2016, so this is well before the protests. He interacted with the Black Lives Matter, and his first reaction, whether or not it because he interacted with some news article or whatever, was all lives matter. Like, what do you mean? And I actually talked to him about it for 2 hours, and like I explained kind of this, that, and this, and he was like, okay, yeah, I see that. And I don't think, like, part of that I think is because he's from a different generation. Like, he's not already like rooted in, like, I feel like to some extent, and maybe this will change, the people who grow up in this time, like they just latch onto the first first thing they get convinced by, and then it's all lives matter, and it's like, what are you talking about? I'm not even going to listen to you. Like, yeah, so right, I feel like this is generational, or
yeah, I think this is like a rhetorical misstep that the left makes a lot, and it kills me. Obviously, my team's missteps kill me way worse than the other teams. But I think what we do a lot of times is we'll create these slogans or these brands that are meant to generate a discussion. So I feel like, and I'll be honest, Black lives do matter, and I'm down with the movement. But even when that first name came out, it made me squeamish rhetorically, because I think it's designed to create a discussion. When you say Black Lives Matter, I think, especially when back in a few years ago when the movement was named, there's an implied discussion, and there's an implied, what do you mean all lives matter? And then an implied response, but we need to say it specifically when some people's lives aren't valued. And as much as I agree with that response to the response, I think that it takes too long. We need to name our shit in a way that doesn't require a quick back and forth. I'll give you one other example, is defund the police. Because when you talk to a large percentage of folks that say that, they will then say, well, but we really don't mean defund. What we mean is diversify. What we mean is that the police share a smaller burden of what needs to happen. What we mean is there's 911, there's 811, there's 711, there's 611. And the problem is that it takes too long to bait out the response and then assume they're going to listen to your counter response. And I think rhetorically we need to do a better job on the left, really, with our rhetoric and our branding.
Yeah, I remember when Black Lives started, like 2015, 2016. I don't even think, like at this point, like anyone who's liberal is like there and on board, but I think it took like 4 years for even like liberal people to like buy into it, because I think just like when it first started, it was kind of like, it was almost clickbait, and it wasn't necessarily tied to like any like actionable thing, which, as people have discussed the idea, it doesn't need to be. But I think I remember at the time, like, people talking about it, it just like maybe the criticism wasn't all lives matter, but it was like, okay, yeah, like Black Lives Matter, but like where's the action for that? I don't know.
Yeah. And I want to be clear, I'm not asking for politeness. I'm not asking for Black Lives Matter to be more genteel when they make their demands. I'm asking for harder hitting, more irrefutable branding slogans. Basically, I'm asking for something that you have to be stupid to respond to. Because here's the thing: if you're in Arkansas and you're in a bar full of white people, and somebody says Black Lives Matter and somebody says all lives matter, that instantly makes sense to everyone in the bar. I'm not saying it's an ethical response. I'm saying it makes too much sense, and
Yeah,
that's why when those really hard hitting, quick little slogans like "Why are you talking about your house? Your house isn't burning down," and things that can kind of shame people and make points quickly and loudly. That's what I want. That's what I think we lack a bit on the left, because we're too highly educated. We're too assuming that everyone's there like it's a college class and we're going to tear each other ideas apart and that's what's fun. That's not what's happening right now.
Word. So not to cut off an important conversation, but we definitely we have 3 topics planned. We definitely talked
let's go
about something important. So maybe let's transition to something. All right, man.
Maybe even more important. Something that's maybe even more
important. Do aliens exist? UFOs? All of the above. All right, I'll give my little perspective. So I don't know about UFOs, but I'll let you talk about UFOs. I didn't initially, like, in my life, believe that aliens existed. And then at some point when I was like 21 or 22, there was like somebody who like told me about how it's like statistically probable for there to be aliens, and I was like, all right, there's aliens. There's like no doubt.
Yeah.
But I don't know about UFOs.
Well, so I think, I mean, aliens are fun to talk about for sure, and they're connected to the UFO thing. I've been kind of watching UFO stuff for a while, maybe about 10 years. And one thing that's happened, and it's just been kind of swamped by the insanity of the news cycle in the last 5 years. But our military and militaries from all over the world have been disclosing footage, reports, and data that just wasn't getting disclosed before. So kind of quietly, in the last 4 years, basically, it's become something where you went from being kooky for believing in it to you're just not. Like, that stigma is still around, and when people hear the word UFO, they still picture crackpot, but like it's just not that anymore. And it's worth noticing, or it's worth mentioning, the vast majority of UFO videos are not legit. People are very poor at seeing things in the sky. They're incredibly bad at it. They're bad at capturing things in the sky. And so I'm not out here looking at most videos and being moved. There are, incredibly credible military, multiple highly trained officers seeing the same thing, radar readings, and these vehicles are doing things that our vehicles can't do. They just can't. So around that stuff, the biggest debate right now is like, is it human technology that's been secret? Or, basically, is it off-world? I kind of submit, I think there is a chance that it's time traveling humans too.
Yeah, what do you believe?
So there is something flying around on the planet. We do not have air hegemony on this planet, and that's just going to get truer and truer throughout this decade and throughout the future decades as we go. It's just it gets kooky fast, but I'll tell you what I would put money on. If I had to put money on something, and this stuff it gets kookier and kookier the more you answer the questions, and more interesting the more you ask the questions. But you asked, what do I believe? I believe in a theory called Zoo Planet, which is that this is a place that folks can come and observe, and there is some type of non-interventionist policy happening, like a zoo.
I mean, I don't know if I'm there yet, but I'm definitely gonna start some Googling after this. I think my view is aliens certainly exist. Now, whether or not the UFOs could be here pretty much rely on the which is not it seems to be possible is whether or not they have like wormhole technology
Mm.
and like how good that is. And I mean, I guess I think something in support of the say the zoo theory is like on the time scale of like if if there are aliens out there, say they've probably been around for like fucking millions of years or some shit. Like on the scale of the universe, like if they have that wormhole shit, you know, it could have taken them like 100,000 years to get to that technology, and you know maybe like and we've only really had the proper capabilities to document shit in the sky for like 100 years.
True.
Like yeah, I mean like 1,000 years ago they had telescopes, but they're not always looking at the telescopes. They're not always going to be able to see it properly. So I mean that seems to be like from my view in support of that because it's like, well, I mean, there's a lot of time for them to keep coming back. Like maybe there's only been a couple and they haven't made a mistake yet. You know, maybe it takes like 100 for one of them to like fucking press the wrong button and it's like, oh my god, it's a fucking alien.
I tend to think that the ones that are captured, that we've captured on in any way, are ones that are kind of fucking up. You know, maybe a tourist, their first time on the commands of one of these things or something. But you know, some people think that a lot of these, to your point about how long we've been looking up. I mean, some people say, oh, they started paying attention to us when we started setting off nukes. I would tend to say that it's just much that coincides with our recording, our radar, our camera technology, and all that type of thing.
Yes,
But
as far as we know, life is really rare. And if these things have the technology to like literally teleport, then they probably have the technology to find what little life there is.
Yeah, right. So like the
so
radar.
They probably
so one
been
thing
watching for a while because we've had life for fucking hundreds of millions of years.
Yeah, I tend to agree. For your own watching, there is what's his name? David Fravor, I think, something like that. But he went on Rogan, he went on Lex Friedman, he went on a bunch of dope podcasts. But he is the Top Gun Super Hornet pilot that chased one of these things off of San Diego, and that the video that was released by the New York Times last year, that had been leaked for a long time.
I didn't know about this. Area 51 is real.
So okay, so there's something that I just implore you to look into, which is a video that the Pentagon has confirmed, New York Times put out last year. And this guy, you know, so basically what happened is he went out, he chased this thing, then he went back to the aircraft carrier, told his buddies about it, they went out to try to capture it, and that's the video that you can find. But you know, you got to listen to him on Rogan. You will text me less than halfway through this interview, I promise. You're gonna be like, I'm listening to it right now. He is the most sane, level-headed, highly trained guy. He is the guy that you give an $80 million airplane to. You know what I mean? Like, you don't give that to loons. He confessed to faking UFO sightings back in the day. He said he and his boys used to fly around with night vision and their engines turned off. Or what they would do is they would fly around with night vision. They would see some campers in the mountains in like Nevada, because you can see a campfire from 50 miles away. Turn his engines off, glide there, then go vertical, fire his thrusters, go up in the sky, and just be like, oh, we're just farming up like instant UFO sighting. So this guy's like not a UFO guy. And he went out and chased this thing. You know, he and his whole crew had radar lock on it, all this stuff, and hearing him describe the vehicle, and basically that he says that this thing is much farther along than anything we have on the planet. This is not a secret that the Russians could keep. This would change everything about every tech we have running on the whole planet. So
what was so basically unique about it? Was it like invisible?
No, not invisible, but it moved apparently without inertia. So it made moves kind of like this, as opposed to, you know, a helicopter, which would have to slow down, stop, and then change direction. It just went millions of times faster. So there's a moment where his wingman is like at 8,000 feet looking down on him. He's down here trying to make contact with it, and they both lose sight of it at the exact same time. And the parallax between those two viewpoints must have meant it was going beyond fast, basically. They have radar readings of these things coming down from 80,000 feet, which is space, doing their thing, going back up. They have radar readings of these things that spend way more time in the air than ours can. Like refueling is not a thing for them. 12-hour radar readings that just keep bugging around and disappearing and showing up again. And once you look into this stuff and you see that it's all American Pentagon stuff, you hear this guy talk, you're gonna come back to me and be like, damn, like there is shit flying around. We don't have air supremacy. It seems like they would have nuked us already if that was the idea.
Maybe they're scouting us out.
Like I said, I think that if you master space, there's a chance you mastered time too. So it's worth considering that it's time traveling human tourists.
Time traveling human yeah, what do you think they would look like? I don't think they'd be humans. Like, I think there's some something that convinced me that they would probably be lizards. They'd probably be cold-blooded. I forget why.
Interesting. So then, okay, so here's a question for you. Do you think there's life or ever was in the solar system?
In our solar system?
Yeah, like you think we're gonna find microbes on Mars or?
I mean, like, it seems to be possible.
Yeah.
Because like Mars, I don't know. I mean, this is the whole debate: is Mars is very close or close enough, but. I mean, like, could there have been the same starting conditions at some point and it just didn't get very far? Yeah, I mean, I believe that.
Yeah. We'll see. Apparently there's a biosignature was detected in like the clouds of Venus this year too. People are really excited about that. Huh. I tend to think it's everywhere. I think that we think about life as like this fragile accident of chemistry. But I think that the more we learn about it, the more it's going to be like a force, like a counter entropy force, where enough chaos happens, stuff falls apart, that's entropy, stuff starts building together, that's life. That's kind of my guess.
Yeah. And I took this one astrology class. I'm not sure if this is where I really started getting into it or if it was like some cosmology I read, but not everyone agrees, but the argument that seems to be like, what's the word? I guess accepted, but they don't they can't prove it. But that's why they're looking for life in other places. Is if there is life here, given how big space is, which is practically infinite, it is statistically probable for there to be life somewhere else, and it is like. Since the universe has been around for 14.7 billion years, maybe they're still out there. They've been around for millions of years. Like maybe the civilizations have gone and fallen. Like
for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. I mean, think about the whole history of science. I feel like one trajectory of science has just been to continually do better about decentering humans from our models. Like Copernicus realized that the Earth doesn't go around the sun, or the sun doesn't go around the Earth, that the Earth goes around the sun. This was a big problem. This was a problem for the church. This was a problem for what existed of science. And this was profoundly destabilizing to people because psychologically, it implied that we are not the center of the universe with everything going around us. And that was Copernicus, and there have been many kind of Copernican revolutions in science since then. I would argue that Darwinism is one. Because before Darwinism, God made us and God made the animals, and we were this, extremely special vessel for everything that's godly about God. Darwinism decenters that, where it puts us, it ties us into the exact same processes that give rise to other species, and it decenters humans from the narrative. So I just think if you extrapolate that concept forward, another version would be all the animals that are getting upgraded in intelligence. Every year, more and more animals are joining the list of the highly intelligent, and the ceiling on the highly intelligent keeps getting pushed up. The more we study animal intelligence, the more gnarly it's going to be. And so I just think, I'm just skeptical of any narrative that puts us at the center. And I think going into the future, we can expect maybe a moment where we decentralize the universe and we realize that truly our universe is like a bubble in this foamy bubble of other universes, and
Yeah.
maybe even other forms of taking us away from the center, because
I
it
love
just
string
doesn't.
theory.
Mm.
Or like that whole, I forget, I think it's called string theory. It's like there's all these dimensions. I was once like, I got really stoned and I was like, dude, God is a fifth dimensional being. Like God, like if you've read about I think it's string theory. There's like the fourth dimension, which is time, and the fifth dimension, which is like a collection of possible realities in our like universe, and then the sixth dimension is like a collection of. So there like could be like a two-dimensional being is an ant, like a two-dimensional being is like fucking this, three-dimensional being is us, like it's so on. And I'm like, I was like, dude, if there's a god, in fact, maybe it's quite likely they're like a seventh dimensional being, which is just impossible for us to conceive, but it's fun, random.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think like the way that I think about God is as a name for the fifth dimension. Like
Exactly.
whatever declination of science would describe all of nature, all of time, the macro and the micro. I mean, that's basically all three dimensions plus time. So you put those together, whatever that bundle is, God is. I'm happy to call it God. I'm happy to call it a bunch of other things too. But
yeah,
I think it's one of those kind of recursive arguments. Like, yeah, shit, like, but it is true, and going back to the aliens thing, that's one of the more compelling reasons why they're not trying to talk to us, is famously, or like the classic paradox, or the classic simile is that Columbus didn't kneel down and try to talk to the ants. And I think that's
true.
That's kind of like a good thought
they
experiment.
Probably
about,
see us as ants,
or
or maybe not.
Maybe
ants,
like. Yeah, maybe there are some chimps on our planet that are starting to use stone tools. They like break nuts with stones, and people say they entered the Oldowan age, which is like the pre-Stone Age tech age, and maybe they give us some of those.
Yeah, that could be like us learning, because I think the limit right now in terms of understanding the smallest building block, it's something like we got to atoms and then we got to quarks. And I forget, but there's like a quantum particle that is like being researched, which is like it's a particle that's smaller than a quark or whatever. I'm a little wrong, and it like can be in two places at the same time, and then like that is
the Higgs boson particle.
Yes,
I think is what
that
you're
one.
about.
Yeah, and that's like they think that could be how. I've read about this a lot, but I'm probably fudging it. That could be how we could solve gravity, which is the only unsolved force.
Totally. In fact, Einstein hated this. The idea that one particle could be related to another without anything going in between them. And apparently he died trying to create a math that solved the behavior of subatomic particles without quantum physics, because he just hated it. But the truth is, it's that next paradigm for sure.
And the reason why that's relevant to this conversation is if there are two particles that are millions of years away that are connected, then if you sync up a whole like body of particles, that is time travel. Like that's kind of the idea, or something like that. Like I don't know.
That's interesting. Yeah, space travel.
Or not time travel, space travel. Yeah.
Yeah, but when you said it that way, it's interesting. Yeah, space travel without a journey is time travel.
Yeah.
Like we just saw a star explode.
Exactly. Yeah.
A star just exploded in our telescopes that exploded when dinosaurs were here.
Yeah.
It's like 65, 70 million light years away.
Yeah.
So I guess if you could travel there with non-locality, it's maybe an open question of what would happen. But yeah, you don't make the journey, you just arrive there.
Hard to conceive, fun to think about.
Yeah, totally. That's why quantum computing is kind of the bleeding edge of what folks are trying to pull off, because right now we store data on these 2D planes of electrons. They're on or off. And if you can imagine a node of information storage that could be both on and off.
Yeah, there's four states.
exponentially fucking
something like that.
more flexible. Yeah.
All right, so let's move to the last topic. That was great. All right, I think I'm gonna need you to start this off. World building. I don't know what you mean by as a mammoth swing in narrative forms.
I'll tell you what I mean. I think that, all art forms change over time. I take that as a given. The art form of storytelling across multiple art forms, really, I think we are watching it change. And I think that it began around Lord of the Rings, and this change is really only still now beginning to pick up steam. But it's a change from a linear story with a hero, a set and setting, a plot, and a finale, to a form of storytelling which is world building. You flesh out a world. You create a place where stories can occur. You're building the environment. And that's what Tolkien did. That's why the Silmarillion exists, and that's why you could write a story in the universe of the Hobbit.
It's not just one story. Like there's no it's not isolated.
Right.
Like the characters don't just appear and then they have no context to something else. It's like you're building context.
Completely. History. And at the highest level, historiology, which is basically the imperfect, history as a natural system itself. So like in Game of Thrones, if you're in a Game of Thrones scene and you open up a history book and read it, you can't trust what's written on that page. You know that the king at that time made sure the history book said something. That's kind of like the next level of world building, where even what the narrator says to you is maybe unstable because the process of history in that world is corrupted as it unfolds. But I think that basically what we're seeing is increasingly, now that audiences have had a taste of it, they're more and more hungry for it. Folks are less willing to buy into one universe for one story, and we want crossover universes. We want the type of universe
into
building
the
where
Spideyverse. I don't know if you've seen that.
Actually, I didn't see it, but apparently
you have to watch it, dude. It's
all I hear
right
is it's
what
next
you just
level.
said.
Okay, yeah, I'll check it out. But yeah, so I think that dovetails with games too. You think about The Witcher.
Very much so.
You think about the way their stories are told. So when I say a mammoth swing, I mean like maybe it'll take more than a century for this swing to lurch in its way, but we're seeing it happen hard. And as content creators, I think that it's worth understanding that this is the future of storytelling.
So I'm my stream is Warcraft 3. Just think World of Warcraft. So this has been something so interesting that I've learned recently. I mean, I started streaming because it's fun to play, not that I cared that much about the world, but I think one of the reasons World of Warcraft is still the most popular MMO 20 years later. I mean, there's other things. It's addicting, they do this and that, but it's dude, the universe is so fucking there's so much depth and it's so interesting, and there is no single story. There's just hundreds of narratives within this world that doesn't have inconsistencies. And when people get upset about how Blizzard their whatever their next arc is, it's because of inconsistencies. That world is so important to them, and they're like, oh, what the fuck? There's a break. But yeah, that Warhammer universe is the so I think this is preloader. I'm not sure. It must have been after Lord of the Rings, but it's very similar to Lord of the Rings in aesthetic. But that's another one where I learned that there are people who are just huge Warhammer fans because it started as a tabletop game in the 50s or something. But
really?
Yeah, I don't know. It started a long time ago. But yeah, I think that's probably if I were to just be some of the best worlds, best narratives or environments
lore.
Lore. It's you got Lord of the Rings, obviously. Game of Thrones, I think Warcraft, Warhammer, and then Harry Potter is great, man.
Does
Like the
that too.
stories are great, but
Right.
you can just fantasize. Like you can just,
Right.
it's really
Right.
consistent.
You can write your fan erotica to your heart's content.
Yeah, and Marvel Cinematic Universe they have done a phenomenal job. Like I
Yep.
think it was always pretty developed, but it seems like in the past 10 years they really stepped up their game.
That's why I think we're still at the beginning of this change, is because the truth is that the powers that be are only just realizing that this is what makes money, and that this is what folks want. You know, I think Star Wars too is worth bringing up.
Oh
in
yeah,
that,
yeah,
like,
Star
that
Wars. I mean,
history of
there's
that.
quite a few,
Yeah,
but
but you were mentioning WoW. I don't know if I don't know if this dimension occurs in Warcraft 3 per se. I believe it happens in old school Warcraft, certainly in other MMOs I've played, where
World of
you have the
Warcraft
lore.
is really where they fleshed it out.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I feel like that is, it's a futuristic art form in a lot of reasons, but especially in this kind of narrative form discussion we're having, because when you have a world and there's history and there's lore and there's details and there's stories in that world, and then you have human player guilds that are taking actions, and now you have a living memory of the history of player guilds and the geopolitics of groups
Oh,
of
that's
players,
so real, man.
and you're a part of that. I mean, that makes watching a movie just
Yeah.
look like glancing at a billboard. Do you know what I mean? I mean, that's a level of narrative participation and immersion that
Like guilds and clans.
non-gamer, and dude, I mean, non-gamers and a lot of gamers that don't play MMOs have never even put their toes in the deep waters. But to me, that's the deep waters, when you have clans, following each other, raiding each other, fucking controlling land, even going from one MMO to another. I was playing Mortal Online. A lot of people started playing from that world, Life is Feudal, and you had the same fucking, NSFW versus Dread type
There's a
of
culture. It's a
fucking
really developed culture.
So that's a big part of why Animyst is a single shard. It's a part of why Animyst is a game where you build but it never wipes, because out of all types of games, we're the most obsessed with that level of immersion, and where there's history to the world, but the story comes from players.
Yeah, in the past year since I started streaming and doing Warcraft 3, like I cannot speak to that. Dude, it is too fucking real, man. People remember what happened 10 years ago. There are these clans. Everyone's got in their like mind just burned in. Like this happened and this happened and this happened. And that's just Warcraft 3. It's a pretty small game. You go to World of Warcraft, bro. Like I don't play World of Warcraft. I'm going to start for the expansion because I'm a sellout. But I was hanging out in this World of Warcraft Discord with my friend, and this other random guy came in, and they started like reminiscing about the old days 7 years ago at this guild, and because the big streamer Asmongold was in it, and they were just talking about like this is where Asmongold got his start. So the history is just, people don't forget. It's what they really
insane.
get invested in.
Like I said, a lot of gamers don't know that feel. And the other side of that, on the more mechanical gaming side, is that PvP battles where you have significant armies of players, to the point where you might have a Discord call with 20 to 100 people in it, and you might have someone who is calling that battle and telling the army what to do. That is a level of PvP that, again, many gamers, hardcore Siege players, hardcore fucking Overwatch players, people do not know what it's like to feel that, where you're a cog in the army and you're fighting someone and it's commander versus commander. I feel like that is a big dimension of gaming that has yet to be fully exposed, and whatever dev team brings that feeling of massive PvP down to an attainable, non-grindy game audience will make money, or probably the second person to do that will make money.
The fifth. So have you ever heard of Planetside?
A lot of gamers never thought. Planetside, I've heard of it.
Okay, this game is so cool. It never took off because this and that. It is literally that. So it's like, I think a lot. The problem that a lot of these games have is I don't think they can monetize properly, because they can't have it. You can't buy it. Like, it just doesn't work if you need 300 players in a game.
Right.
And the other problem is like it needs too many players. But anyway, the game is like
Yeah.
there's this gigantic world. It's a shooter, and people control like there are regions. Say there's like 5 regions, and there are like 3 teams of like up to 100 playing at once. And so then, and there's squad leaders, there's platoon leaders. It is so fucking cool, man. And then,
So cool.
I mean, there's not as much integration where, like, I mean, I think it's there, but it's harder. It's not like raiding in WoW, where, like, you have to be in the Discord call at 25, so you're, like, immediately the cog. But it just feels so cool to be, like, a soldier and, like, fighting in this battle, and then in this other place, there's 20 other people, and I'm like, Planetside is fucking sick.
So sick. I was playing Glory of Victus, which is a kind of like it's a dope game. It is a medieval siege sim. There's 3 factions. You're going to be moving with an army, cannons, archers, melee, often 20 to 60 versus similar army size. And we were defending a castle, and we were losing. And we were a bit outnumbered, and we were kind of collapsing. And then suddenly another voice comes on the call. It was just a calm, kind voice. Someone spoke up and just took command and just said, I need a line of heavy guys with shields in the tunnel. I need half the archers on the right tower, the other half on the left tower. And they just started talking, push, 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 go forward, come back, come back, come back, come back, come back. And they just took command, and we won. And, never would have happened without that leadership. And that, again, that is a dimension of gaming that I want more people to feel. A lot of people have never been there.
I think Discord is a huge step in the in the direction of that being possible, because like that works really well in games right now because you can have a Discord call with up to 99 people. So, but I think maybe what's lacking is a lot of these games that try to do it, people aren't connected in the community Discords because it's, you're just playing a shooter. Why would you be in this and that? But it's starting to exist. It is fun.
Yeah.
It is fun.
It's fun. It's definitely it's a lot of challenges. It's a tech challenge on a dev side. I mean, the fact that Glory of Victus might have 100 people on a battlefield, a lot of devs would shudder at developing that.
Yeah.
You said that a problem with Planetside is it needs too many people. That is definitely something that, that's kind of been the story of Animyst, is that we released it and we got that number down very low. Like if 10 people played it 24/7, that's really all it needs. But that's actually a lot of people. That's like 10,000 players playing 2 hours a week or something. It's like kind of a lot.
Yeah.
So the last 3 years have been just us kind of trying to downscale it into a 1-player game that can be played when you're alone. But it's true, man. I think the next game I dev, I'm not sure I want it to be something where it needs a population to be played. Because doing that without money and promotion support is uphill, dude.
Yeah, but I fully agree with what you said. I'm personally of the opinion that the gaming like worlds or like there are so many genres that are just don't even exist yet. And like, I could talk about this in depth, but the general idea to me is like we are like still hundreds of years from like what could be, like there's these genres. And, everyone's, there have been flirtations. For instance, there's this game Mag on the PS3 that came out like 10 years ago that maybe was one of the first attempts at this mass, like, kind of shooter game where, like, it was... And they had to close down the game, too, because of population problems. But it was, like, 33 versus 33 versus 33.
Yeah.
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 So
basically, I mean, this is all just kind of future tech, and all dev teams that are striving for it, they know they're pushing their stuff, and there'll be 10,000 people on a battlefield, probably be a Warhammer 40K fucking MMO where people are like raiding planets and stuff.
As the population of the planet increases to an unsustainable point.
Yeah, maybe. But to bring it back to the beginning. One reason why I'm so hopeful about MMOs and one reason why I'm still very obsessed with making mine is that this is a social network that crosses party lines.
Oh, so true.
This is the only form of social network where you might make friends with someone before you find out who they vote for. Like there's people who have had my back in a stressful situation and yet think feminism is toxic, but that's how you build those connections. That's how you might begin to build those connections. And so I think it's a very hopeful form of social network, and Facebook isn't.
One of my best friends in the online world now, I met through my stream. His name is Sircaster. Hopefully he's watching. He is hard fucking right. He is like anti-abortion, anti-everything. It doesn't matter, bro. Like we are chill. We have no problems. We even talk about it. Like we tease each other about it. But it's like
Right.
I totally agree with you. It's like a first step, and maybe we'll never convince each other of, but at least it opens a door of people being on different sides in the same room.
Right. It's a reason to exist together. That's other than a reason. The wolves are coming. The orcs are coming. Whatever. Like put down the politics because we need to fight back. And that's something that I am constantly trying to communicate to like my non-gamer friends and like my families. I got taken out to dinner by my mom's cousin, who's a very erudite professor. He writes for the New York Times. He's a professor of theology. And it was right when we had started working on Animyst. And he kind of asked me at dinner, he was like, how does this work you're doing support democracy? And I thought about it. I was like, wow, that's like a really overly hardcore question to ask like a young game dev or whatever. But at the same time, I was like, actually, good ass answer. Jackass. You see where I'm going with it. I was like, it does. It's a place where you might meet anyone and have a reason to be friends first. And then the politics discussion comes later. And yeah, our society doesn't have those places.
Yeah.
Doesn't even have those places where you might interact, honestly.
Maybe one day in another country.
Yeah, maybe.
But all right, word. So we're at 1 hour almost exactly. Do you want to wrap up? That was
Yeah,
an excellent.
I'm happy to.
Excellent.
Yeah, that was very, very fun.
Topics
dude.
that are very different, but somehow they're actually, pretty connected. I'd say.
Yeah.
Aliens
Well,
would probably think our political schisms are just barbaric, right?
I said I don't see this stuff healing. I don't see how the chasm heals. Well, that would do it. If you had a technology floating over freaking Kansas City and everyone was watching it live,
yeah,
that could be a healing balm.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so yeah, BladeMasterRUSH Show on YouTube. If you're here from Spotify, drop a sub, comment, like, check out my Twitch. I stream Warcraft 3. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. We got other episodes on the channel. Shout out Tarpit, twitch.tv/Tarpit, youtube.com/Tarpit. He got a new album out. Check out Animyst on Steam. Thank you guys for watching. Tarpit, you got closing remarks?
We got to talk about your music next time.
Oh, yes. Let's do it. This is great. We could do like a side podcast. Maybe this is your podcast and you have me on, dude. I would love to. You go.
Cov and I have a plan to do at least 10 episodes, the two of us, and then start having guests. So, that can definitely happen.
Quick to end. I have a music video out. It is the first song I've ever recorded, and I just went in hard. Like, this guy that I know made this beat, and I listened to it. It wasn't for me. It was like this electronic beat. And as soon as I listened to it, within an hour, it was written. I recorded it, music video, all in 3 days. It was sick. We're coming out with more music. I love it.
That's a good sign, man. I gotta say, not all songs just get pooped out in a perfect clean pinch like that.
Yeah.
When it happens, it's a gift, dude. And yeah, that song is
awesome.
playing. That's what's up.
All right, have a great day, guys.
Thank you for having me, man. This was fun.